Namaste. Welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity Yoga. And we're just going to continue with the third of the 5 remembrances. The 5 remembrances are the 5 realities or truths of life that we as humans cannot escape. And the first of those remembrances that I discussed previously was, I am of the nature to grow old, I cannot escape aging. I am of the nature to grow old, I cannot escape aging. The second was, I am of the nature to have ill health, I cannot escape sickness. I am of the nature to have ill health, I cannot escape sickness. And the third one that we're going to discuss today is probably one of the most difficult ones that we have to learn to deal with in this human existence, because it's a very true reality that many of us try to avoid. And that is, I am of the nature to die, I cannot escape death. I am of the nature to die, I cannot escape death. Now, as I've said, that is one of the things that we find probably the most hardest to accept in this human experience. Death is something we tend to fear. We see it as the ultimate end of everything. And that death can come in the form of death of the physical body. We know that when we were born, we all have an expiration date on our bodies. We don't know when or how our bodies will eventually succumb and die, but we know that they will, right? At some point. It could be through old age. We could live to the age of 104, but eventually the body's going to cease to function, and then it will die. We could have an accident at a very young age and die suddenly. We could develop a life-threatening disease that ends our life prematurely and die from that. We can die from a violent death. We don't know how we're going to die, but we know as human beings we are going to die. Yet we find, for some reason, this need to avoid that reality, to pretend it doesn't exist. We do everything we can to escape this idea of death. We push death aside, especially in the Western cultures. We push death aside so that we don't have to face it, right? When people die in our culture, they're taken away. The bodies are made to resemble the living, and then when they do that, they are presented for viewing for 2 to 3 days prior to being buried or cremated or something along that line. But it is a very hush-hush affair, and we tend to not embrace the reality of it. In India, in comparison, for example, in some places of India, people know they're going to die, and prior to dying, especially if they're not well off, they will try to do whatever they can to earn the money they need for their funeral pyre, and then they will go to the city where most burials will take place, and then they, right out in the open, are on a funeral pyre, and they set the fire, and once the body is dead, it's exposed to everybody. And it becomes a very important and almost joyous occasion to have this death out in the open. It becomes a reality of life. Of course, India, one of the biggest religions in India is Hinduism, and there is this belief in reincarnation, this knowledge that the body is only here for temporarily, but the soul within the body will come back in another form. So that might make it a little easier for most people to accept death. Now, even in the Christian doctrines, it is said to be true that originally reincarnation was a part of the Bible, but the church took it out because it didn't, it kind of removed the power they had over the state. If it were to be true, people might not act the way the church wanted them to act. So, yeah, reincarnation was even a part of Christianity. In some Christian religions, it still is. But regardless of that, we still have this tendency to fear death and fear anything related to death. It's a very sad time in the human life, when we lose people to death, which is also a part of death, right? If not, we might not be the ones dying, but people we love might be the ones dying. it involves so much grief that we feel we do not have the mental or emotional capacity to handle it many times. So it's best to let's not talk about death. That's morbid is a word we often use when people talk about death. It's so morbid. Why are you getting so dark? When death doesn't have to be darkness. Death can be just as it is, a passage into another state of being. Now, I personally believe, too, that we come back in other forms. So I don't believe death of the body is the end of us. I believe that who we truly are is much more than this physical body and this mind and this personality that we used to present ourselves to the rest of the world with. I believe we are much, much more than that. And death is not the end of that, because that which we are is eternal, right? It's part of the omniscient and omnipresent and omnipotent reality that we have yet to see and truly understand. So death is not something I personally fear. I'm not saying that I want to die anytime soon, but it's not something I fear, and I do not see it as the ultimate end anymore. Yet I understand the fear of death, and I know it's the mother fear of all fears, and most phobias are related to death, to the fear of death, because death can be more than just the ending of the physical body. It could be the end of this connection or this identification we have with the meanness of who we are. So it could be a psychosocial death, and we all fear losing the sense of who we are. What if I lose my job? We fear that. That is the death of a role we once played. So we fear that. What will I be after that? We may fear the end of a relationship, because that's the death of that relationship, and that we identified ourselves as the partner or the parent or the friend in that relationship. So when that ends, we feel that that's the end of us. So we think the same way when the body's about to die. What happens when my body dies? That will be the end of me. What happens when my relationship dies? That will be the end of me in that role as a partner. What happens if I lose my job? That will be the end of me in that role as that particular professional, right? So we fear death in many different ways, in many different forms. But the thing to remember is that we are not that which we fear we are losing when we die. We are not the role we played in our work situation. We are not the role we played in our relationship situation. We are not the role we play in any of the things we do here. We are not the body or the mind that is actually participating in these roles. We are the essence behind it all. And we're experiencing this human that I, for example, call me and you call you. We are just simply experiencing, observing, and participating in this wonderful dance of life for as long as it lasts. And watching this human go through it, watching this human participate, watching this human don these roles for the time between our birth and the date of our death, which is that big slash. And that slash, that hyphen, is our life, right? So we fear the end of it, so much so that we forget to live in the hyphen itself. We forget to live in that dash. We forget to experience the moment fully that we're living in. We're trying to protect ourselves from the inevitable. We're doing whatever we can to stay alive in whatever form that means, whether it just be the body staying alive and doing whatever we can to maintain a certain level of health, or staying alive in that relationship, that we identify as, staying alive in that role as a worker that we identify as. So death comes in many forms, and the fear of death comes in many forms, and often stops us from living. If we were to turn around and accept death, accept that it is an inevitable process, and know every day, I might die today. I might die tomorrow, I might die today. So if I know I've only had 24 hours left to live, how am I going to live those 24 hours? What am I going to do in them that will make a difference? And this is where the fifth remembrance maybe comes in when we talk about the five remembrances that we're dealing with now. And the fifth remembrance is that my only true belongings are my actions. They are the ground on which I stand, and I can't escape the consequences of my actions. So, in other words, the only thing I have to leave behind are my actions, be they my thoughts or my words or the energy I leave behind. So let's really focus on leaving behind something positive, right? Making whatever I have from the date of my birth to the date of my death have to live, making that the most powerful, most wonderful experience it can be, by serving others, by serving self with the big S, by seeking to find out who we truly are underneath all this ideas of who we think we are, and giving to the world in a way that really matters. So this fear of death, or this idea of death, that we are of the nature to die, because we are in physical forms, bodies and minds that will not last. Our body will not last. Our personalities will not last. They're constantly changing. Knowing that impermanence of the physical form in which we inhabit, we can make the most of the time we have here by enjoying the ride, enjoying the process, seeing the change and embracing the change and the impermanence that's happening to us and around us, and honoring this life for however long it lasts, putting aside fear for love of life. And that, to me, is one of the greatest things we can achieve through this third remembrance. Because yes, we are all of the nature to die, and we are going to die someday. We don't know how, but we're all going to die someday. There is no escaping death. So no matter what your mind tells you, how you can avoid it in your mind and think about other things, or go, no, people around you die, there is no escaping death. It is a reality. It is a reality that can not only give us a certain amount of peace while we're here, it can help us to honor this life we have. Anyway, I'm not sure if I made a lick of sense. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.